In this video, we will be setting up our layer properties. Layers is a powerful tool that allows us to stack information on top of one another and either turn that information on or off depending on the view that we want to share. On the screen, I've pulled up a drawing that has a couple of residential properties. It's got our street title down below. We can see our property lines. We can see trees. The property over on the right-hand side has a setback. And just for demonstration purposes right now, I'll show you how we can turn these on and off. So if I go to this drop down here at the top under my layers area, I can use the light bulb to either turn on or turn off that layer. So if I wanted to turn off my trees because I don't need to show that information on the drawing, I can turn off the light bulb. I can do the same thing with the text and the setback. And I can do this in any order that I desire. The layers that you see here are all customizable, and that's what we'll do next. Here I've opened up a new file and I've set my units to architectural. Before I draw, I'm going to set up my layers. You can do this at any time, and you can certainly add new layers as you go, but I found for me it helps me stay better organized if I set my layers up at the beginning of my drawing. So to do that, I'm going to go here to Layer Properties and click this button. When I do that, I get a box that appears that allows me to manage my layers. Sometimes when it first comes in, these columns are not very wide, and so you can adjust those so you can see what's going on. You can stretch out your manager box over here on the right-hand side. AutoCAD defaults to layer 0. And we typically don't draw anything on layer 0. We want to define all of the information that we're going to put into our drawing. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a new layer, and we'll do several of these in this tutorial. Like everything else in AutoCAD, there's multiple ways in which to start a new layer. I can use this button up here. It looks like a bunch of sheets on top of each other with the little sun. I can do Alt-N, or I can right-click anywhere in this area and select New Layer. So when I do that, I get the option then to name my layer. Many firms and organizations have their own way that they want the layers named. The American Institute of Architects also has a layer naming guide. And so what we're going to do is we're going to call this A, which stands for Architectural Drawing, and then Wall. So the first button that we come to in this column is on or off. And so I can select that light bulb on or off. I'm going to keep it on for now. The next column is freeze, and we can turn that on or off. The freeze button does much of what the on-off button does, but it also takes it out of AutoCAD's memory. So things might run a little bit faster, especially if you have dozens and dozens of layers. So I'm going to turn this back on. And I'll show examples of how these things work in just a minute. The next one is lock. So when I draw something and I lock that layer, we can't modify or change or delete that layer. The next one is plot. When I click on plot, you notice it puts a little Ghostbuster symbol next to it. That layer will not plot. So we used the example earlier of the site plan. So maybe I wanted to leave the trees in the view that I'm seeing on the screen, but I can select it not to plot. And when I plot out the drawing, those trees will not be visible. The next column is color. And if I want to change my color, I don't want to select up here. I want to select actually the color right here. So I'm going to select that. And we have a box that appears to allow us to select colors. AutoCAD already has defined 9 different colors. They've actually named them. We can also select any of the colors that we find here in their palette. We can go to the True Color tab, and we can do RGB values. We can go to Color Books, and load in various colors as well. For this tutorial, we'll stick with the basic colors that we're going to find down here. So for my wall, I think I'm going to do red. So I'm going to select this one. One of the things that's important is to remember that most likely somebody else is going to be viewing your work. And so if they're going to load AutoCAD and I'm using the background that is very dark, I probably don't want to pick something like this because it's going to be very difficult to read. So I'm going to select red. I'm going to click OK. The next one is line type. So if I click on the word continuous, that means that it is a solid line. If I wanted to load a different line style in, perhaps a dashed line, I would click the load button and I can scroll through these different line types. So I'm going to select my dashed line. So I'm going to select dashed and select OK. You notice though, my dashed is not highlighted. So if I click OK right now, it still goes back to continuous. So I need to make sure if I want to use dashed, I select dashed and then click OK. For my walls, however, I'm going to leave them continuous. So I'm going to click continuous, click OK. And then the final one we'll talk about in this tutorial is line weight. I'm going to select line weight. One thing that might be of interest is that all of the line weights are in millimeters. Now I know I've set up my AutoCAD file to be in the units of architectural, which is feet and inches, but the reason they're in millimeters is because these line weights are mimicking a pen. So for my walls, I think I'm going to select half. So I'm going to go to 0.5 and select OK. And I'm going to do this for a couple of additional layers. So I'm going to click my new button. And I'm going to call this one Windows. So I'm going to select New. And I'm going to make this one for dimensions. So I'm going to do A for architectural. ANNO is annotation. And dims. I'm going to leave all these on. I'm going to change the color. I'm going to change that to, change it to 7, which is white. I'm going to leave that continuous, and I'm going to change my line weight to 0.25. Click OK. If I wanted to change the name, maybe I misspelled it or I want to change it in some way, I can simply right click on it and go to rename layer, and then I can type in the new name. You'll notice as I go along, it puts a check mark next to the layer. That check mark indicates that that's the layer that I'm going to start drawing on. So if I were to select the line tool right now, it would think that I want to draw on the dimension layer. And we'll show how to set that when we actually start drawing in just a minute. Let me do a couple of more and then I think we'll be set. So I'm going to do a new layer. I'm going to make this one for doors, so A-doors. For my door color, I'm going to select index 4 with a line weight of, let's do 0.35. Click OK. And we'll do one more for Windows. Notice I did not capitalize this. I'm going to right click, go to rename. There we go. So I'm going to rename this one A-GLAZ. That stands for glazing. And I'm going to make this one 0.35, so that's already set, but I'm going to change the color to 3. Click OK. So I've got 4 layers that I've set up. They have different line weights, different colors. When I'm happy with that, I can simply close this box. So when I go up here to the drop down, it shows the layer that is currently the default one that I'm going to be drawing in. So if I select the line tool and I draw a line, I'm going to draw a couple of lines. That is on my dimension layer. And maybe I wanted that to be on my wall layer. So if I go to a wall layer, you notice it didn't change it to red. That's because the wall was not selected in order to change it. So let me show you how that's done. So if I select this, again, it goes back to my dimension layer. But if I want to put it on a different layer, I simply just assign it to the wall layer. And I can do this with all of them. Now you notice when I click all three of these, because this one's on a different layer than these two, this drop down is blank. So I'm simply going to go down to wall, and now they're all on the wall layer. And I can draw on that wall layer, and that's going to be red. If I wanted to change this to a different, maybe I wanted to change it to doors, I can simply assign it to the door layer. Regardless of the layer that it's on, I'm still able to snap, depending on how I have my snap set up, whether it's endpoints or midpoints or nearest or perpendicular, I can still snap to those points.